So give me just a half a second. We'll have that started, and we'll go ahead and launch from there. Well, I'm sorry about that. A little technical difficulty just trying to launch into the video portion as well. But that just means you guys won't have to look at me, which is probably a plus. So, as she said, as she mentioned, my name is Ken Griffin, and I'm the Vice President of the Storage Solutions group within our AIS division here at Tech Data. Just a real quick brief history of my background to where it may apply. I spent about 10 years with Tech Data, and I was out of Tech Data for about 16 years and returned about 2 years ago. In that interim time, I spent 12 years mostly in the VAR channel, working for a couple of different resellers, one that was more of a Southeast regionally based VAR, one that was part of more of a national entity. So when I think about when I'm going to talk about the technology, and I'm going to probably get into where things are heading and what we're seeing out there and where I think there's some opportunities, I try to do so by putting kind of my reseller hat back on, thinking of the days that obviously we were selling things to an end user from an end user perspective, and hopefully trying to kind of relate with the standpoint from where you guys are at right now and what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So what we're going to talk a little bit about today is emerging technologies, the big ones being big data, analytics, BYOD, software-defined networking, and software-defined data center. And we'll talk a little bit about our AIS division first, because I want to at least set up the framework of how Tech Data is orchestrating and setting up an organization to support you in these efforts. I'm not going to spend too much time on the selling side. I'm going to probably talk a lot about the technology, what the industry is saying about the technologies, where they're going, and hopefully give you some ideas of ways to pair up and set your businesses so that you guys can be on top of these and take advantage of these opportunities as they come along. So we're going to cover AIS first. Then we'll talk about the big data and analytics overview. I'll go a little bit at SDN and software-defined data center. And I don't have a whole lot of BYOD because I think VDI and BYOD has been fairly well discussed and beaten up, and I think everybody's got a pretty good feeling for it. But there are certain tie-ins to these other aspects, so I will try to cover those as well. So we'll start off with Tech Data and our AIS group. And what we've done is, this just gives you kind of an idea of where we came from. So if you look in the center there, Tech Data, as you know, has been around for almost 40 years, really as a broad line distributor for many of those years, selling a variety of different technology products. And over time, we've developed outside of that with an integrated supply chain services, and then breaking out some of the other divisions that we have. So we have consumer electronics, our software division, our data center division, which is our AIS group, and mobility. So this just shows some of the breakouts of what Tech Data has on top of the broad line and integrated. Really what I'm going to talk about today is really coming from that upper corner, which is the data center group. And we'll talk more on a probably U.S. basis, but some of the numbers that you're seeing are actually more of a worldwide number for Tech Data on the AIS and data center business. So somewhere between $7.5 and $8 billion a year we do in data center. So what is AIS? AIS is our fancy three-letter acronym that we created for data center. And really what it is it's advanced infrastructure solutions. You'll probably see a lot of marketing from time to time from Tech Data about it. The group was created about 7 years ago, really with a key mission, and that was to take all this excellent kind of commodity, volume-based business experience that we had in the technology industry, but apply that to some of the more challenging areas and technologies and things that are emerging throughout the whole data center side. And that's really, the group, we realized it's a different selling motion, it's a different set of resources that are necessary, and we had to build a division to be able to support that. What was our goal? Was to help our reseller partners and customers develop solutions so that they can deploy and they can support data center, unified communications, video, and everything that falls within those higher technology areas. The goal is also to help our resellers extend deep expertise, and then we do a lot around training and hands-on and certifications as well to assist, to get people prepared to be able to support this. So we took a snapshot. We said, okay, let's just go back and see how we were doing. And this was about, this is our fiscal year 12, which we're now currently in a fiscal year 15, which just kicked off the beginning of February. So really we're looking at fiscal year 12, which would have ended in beginning of 2012. We had 13,000 resellers that were selling multiple technologies from the AIS or data center stack. And that is server, storage, virtualization, power and energy management, security, and networking. And with that, what we've done is we've kind of taken this chart and said, how many of those technologies did each of them sell? And as you see, as you move from the left to the right, and you get out to people, to organizations selling 5 or 6 technologies, the number drops down substantially. In fact, if you look at the last 3, they're in the the low 20% range, 23%, I believe, for the last 3 categories. Jump ahead to the fiscal year 13, which would have ended last year, and we had a total of nearly 15,000 resellers, just under 15,000, that sold multiple technology. But I think the interesting trend that we saw were people moving across the stack, not just selling server, not just selling storage or virtualization, but really moving across and selling 4 or more technologies. And in this case, you're at 37% that sold 4 or more technologies. So a tremendous jump from fiscal year 13 to fiscal year 14. We've run our analysis now for this past year, which just ended at the end of January, and I don't have an updated slide for it yet, but for fiscal year 14, which just concluded, we were over 15,500, but the more interesting note is that we were well over 43% of our resellers were selling 4 or more technologies. So again, what we're seeing is this trend and this movement upward to sell more of a solution sale. We're seeing people, we're seeing more and more quote requests and opportunities coming through that will combine server, it will combine storage, it may combine networking, it can combine enterprise software or virtualization, all as part of the solution they're providing to their customers. And so again, we're seeing a large shift and continued transition where we're nearly at, I'm hoping by the end of next year, we're at about 50% of our AIS-type resellers, data center resellers, selling at least half, more than half of the stack. So what do we offer from an AIS reseller support perspective to help our customers? I'm going to build the slide out real quick because, there's really 4 key points of things we add. We have a large system engineering group that's over 80 folks that are available, dedicated to the majority of these high-end product lines. We have a virtualization savvy sales force, and why this is important is because I think a lot of things, the secret sauce to solutions is virtualization, and we have over 500 of our salespeople that are virtualized, have virtualization certificates. So again, deep expertise even across the sales organization, not just in the technical side. We have a licensing desk, which is critical around all the software solutions. And then within Tech Data, we've got our own solution center, which the benefits of that are not just that you can see it if you're ever here in Clearwater, but I think more so when we do a lot of demos and things with our engineers of the products and things we sell, those are all in our own solution center, our data center that we have here. And it is truly a demo data center. We have somewhere close to about $8 million worth of equipment and software in there. So the majority of our key product lines we're able to share, and we have video conferencing and other abilities to share those solutions with you and with your end users. And the one thing I will make sure I do point out when I talk about the engineers, our engineers are capable of hopping on a call with you and your end user customer, and we don't have to disclose that we're Tech Data on the call. So if you ever have a particular need, where maybe you need somebody to help with the configuration or bill materials, or you want them to hop on a call to get clarification around technical solutions, please don't hesitate to leverage our engineering resource. So how are we doing? We're growing. We're about 1/3 of the U.S. sales are in our AIS division. It's growing by between 18 to 20% annually. It's actually, this slide's a little bit outdated because we're just now kind of going through our numbers release. I expect that to be north of $3 billion for last year. I think the most important stat, though, that I want to share is the head count. We realize that the selling motion around data center, around AIS solutions is slow. and there's a lot of movement. I've got one of my product lines that I'm responsible for on the storage side that the typical sale that we take is about $67,000, and it usually goes through about 6 or 8 quote revisions before somebody actually buys the solution. And typically, from initial quote to sale, it's about 60 to 90 days, and that's just one product line. To contrast that, Tech Data's average order size is about $1,000. So when you get into the AIS side of it, they're larger orders. There's a lot more moving parts. There's a lot more quoting typically that goes on, and we realize that you all are involved with every step of the way on going through that process. So again, we want to help and enable you. That takes headcount. There's a lot of people and time and resource commitment to do that. That's not, it's different. It's a different selling motion than you know, maybe buying things that are much more of a volume type play. So what are the emerging technologies we're going to talk about today? Big data, BYOD, SDN, and SDDC. So BYOD, again, I'll jump into a couple slides at the end, but really it's, you know, the virtualization of the environment, being able to put whatever you have out to people, reusers, regardless of what they're using, whether they have tablets, mobile devices, PCs, really any technology they might be leveraging to access into that infrastructure and putting the infrastructure into place. And again, that's being supported by the technology that you're going to put in from a central perspective. Software-defined networking. We're going to talk a little bit about OpenFlow. We'll talk about OpenStack, and we'll hopefully share with you what we see happening in the SDN space. You're going to probably continue to see more and more about SDN. I don't think a day goes by that I don't get at least one email from an eWeek or CRN or one of those groups that doesn't have some topic related to SDN, because it is truly a hot topic. And what I'm hearing from the reseller community is that end users are asking more and more about it. So I'll cover that in detail. We'll talk a little bit about SDDC, but again, I think that's still in the early stage of where you're trying to go with that. But really what you're trying to do is get to an infrastructure as a service type mentality, similar to what we've seen on the server side on the virtualization over multiple years now. And then we'll talk about last, big data, and I'm going to jump into that first because I think big data is, of all of these things that we're talking about here, big data and VDI, maybe on the BYOD standpoint, are probably the ones that are most prevalent today and have the most immediate opportunity. So really, what is all this stuff? What are these technologies? What do they have in common? To me, it's focused on that cloud and virtualization of everything directive that you see going on. End users are looking for easier, better ways to manage what they have. They're trying to do more with less, and they realize that they need a lot more flexibility than they've had in the past. And that's what all of these things really tries to address. So let's start off with big data. I grabbed this cover from Harvard Business Review, and it's actually slightly dated now. I think this was at the end of 2012, this particular Harvard Business Review, actually October 2012. But what I liked about it was two things. One, you go back a year and a half to October of 12, and Harvard Business Review, which is really not a technology journal whatsoever, has created an entire magazine devoted to big data because they see where it's going and where it's headed. And this is the type of information that's getting to not the CIOs, but it's getting to the chief marketing officers, CEOs, vice presidents of business, sales, marketing within organizations. Those are the people that read the Harvard Business Review. And they're seeing that, hey, big data is a big deal. It's something I've got to deal with. I've got to understand it, and I know it's an opportunity. And then they came across, they had some great quotes in there, but one of them I really liked was the fact that on a daily basis, there's more data crossing the internet every second than the entire amount that was stored on the internet 20 years ago. So just tremendous amount of progress in 2 decades. It's really, you know, that speaks to, you know, the volume of what we're dealing with. And I'll give you some more statistics as we go on. Hopefully I won't bore you with too many of them. But so what is big data? It's really defined as 3 things. It's the volume of the data makes it big data, i.e. the size of it. It's the velocity, meaning how fast is the data changing, and what's the turnaround speed for when they can actually create value from it. So having a lot of data that changes a lot, but not being able to do anything with the data really doesn't meet the definition of big data and taking advantage of it. And then variety. What's the different types of data? I think everybody's got, you know, the database side of it down. So if you've got a point-of-sale system or accounting system or whatever runs your company, you know, your operations, most people have that. It sits on top of a database. But what we're talking about here is the unstructured data and some of the semi-structured data and everything else that falls in between, not necessarily the traditional data that people are able to search on and work with and utilize. So how big is the big data opportunity? I just pulled Gartner and IDC to see what some of their numbers were, and you know, Gartner's saying it's 650% growth in worldwide market growth, $232 billion between 2012 and 2016, $34 billion they estimated last year's spend to equal in the big data space. And then if you look at IDC, they're saying $24 billion annually with 32% compound annual growth rate. You know, which numbers are right, I don't really know. You know, the analysts have a lot of projections. They do a lot of different ways and analysis to come up with the numbers they come up with. Regardless of which, I think we can all agree those are very big numbers, and it represents a lot of opportunity for the bar community. And I think the best part of the whole thing when you look at big data is it's so new. It's on the, you know, there's a lot of money out there today on it, but it's still a relatively new area and a new topic that people want to talk about it. And most of our end user customers do not have the expertise to be able to understand and deploy these solutions. So that's where the opportunity comes in for the reseller community. A few more things. How big is it? Again, there's a couple of estimates that are out there. I saw a McKinsey report that said that the healthcare in the U.S. could save $300 billion each year annually savings if they adopted and fully deployed big data across the environments. And then the U.S. government about 2 years ago rolled out an initiative that's $200 million a year investment in big data. And I know everybody's on mute, so I couldn't get laughs. And this is not just the National Security Foundation. So this is across all other areas of shared data sharing. And there's another stat that's kind of low there, which was said, if you saw the third bullet down, machine-generated new data. I think that's actually kind of a hot topic, and it's very interesting because, when you hear Cisco and a lot of these other groups talk about the Internet, they're talking about all these devices that are now all Internet connected. Everything, coming out has an IP address, a MAC address, and is capable of being connected up to the Internet, from your Blu-ray player to your audio receiver to all of most people probably already have, 8 to 15 devices in their home that are Internet ready or capable of being connected. And it's pretty substantial when you think about it. And all of these things are individual devices that have certain sets of requirements, have certain storage requirements, and will generate a certain amount of data. So what's the impact? I think one of the biggest things that's going to come out of this is jobs. And I wanted to illustrate this slide for one key reason. Gartner had said that by the end of next year, 4.4 million jobs will be created specifically dealing with big data and analytics. 4.4 million new jobs in the U.S. And when you look at that, only a third of those jobs they're going to be able to fill, which means that 2/3 of them are going to be open, which is a great opportunity to build a consultancy around big data and analytics. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity. The types of people you might need would be data architects, analysts. They've created this thing called a data scientist, new role that's out. I think it's yet to be defined in my opinion, but I've seen that pop up frequently. Programmers, management of analytics, research analysts, but there's also a whole infrastructure play on top of this where you're going to have people that can deploy these packaged solutions that may combine multiple products from multiple vendors that provide the ultimate solution to help your customer solve some of their big data needs, and that will tie directly in with the analytics side of it. So really key opportunity there. I hope this slide doesn't get lost in translation, but really this is where I think the meat of it is. If you look at where VARs have made the most money over many years, you can go back and take a look at certain data points like year 2000 with the Y2K projects, for those of you that have been around for a while. That was a big deal because end users didn't know what to do or how to do it. They just knew they had to do it, and there was a shortage of resources, and a lot of companies made a significant amount of money with that. I think this is a very similar trend here. We're sitting 14 years later. That I think there's going to be this huge shortage, and everybody's going to try to catch each other because their competitors are doing something, and the folks that can develop and deploy and help support solutions will definitely be on the front side of this and be able to capitalize on it. And they'll also be able to see handsome profits in the interim as well. And the other thing to remember is that big data will impact the entire data center. So your storage, I think everybody thinks of big data and thinks of the storage aspect. I've got to have a lot of storage because we're talking about big data. It's a lot of space that it's going to take up. And that's true. There's definitely a storage element to it. But your servers are going to have to be capable of processing everything that goes through them. And they're going to be able to, you're going to need to have a significant amount of server environment to be able to support that. Your network, I think this is probably one of the most undervalued portions of the impact of what's happening right now with this data push, is that the network, a lot of companies have ignored their networks for many years, and they've missed some of the technology trends that have happened. They're probably on slower technology. They're not taking advantage of the faster speeds that are out there. I think that's going to be a huge one. And then we'll talk a little bit about software-defined networking in a little bit as well, because I think those two are going to go hand in hand and play into each other. As people are building out their Ethernet fabrics, how are they going to manage those fabrics as they go forward? Of course, the software, the security, and your power, cooling, and management, all of these components will have to correlate and correspond with the ability to support the big data initiatives. So what is it driving? So we'll pick the storage part of it. What is it driving there? I think the first bullet is great. 90% of all the data that exists and is being stored in IT today was created in the past 2 years. So 90%. Only 10% that's out there right now existed more than 2 years ago. That is a monumental amount of data if you think about it. And it's creating, this continued crush. That's why you see the storage of all of the areas within technology. Storage had one of the most solid, periods of growth over the last 5 years, even coming out of the recession. The amount of data being stored, those are just some numbers for you. I did put that 2.7 zettabytes, and the reason I did that is that was the volume of data 2 years ago that they were able to estimate based upon IBM's estimations. So zettabyte, I'm going to cover that in a minute, but they're saying that it's going to grow from 2.7 zettabytes. It's the total storage data stored in the world. It's going to grow to 40 zettabytes by 2020, which will be 50 times growth. So to put that in some kind of perspective, this is what a zettabyte is. If you look at that, the bottom number there, that's how many zeros are at the end of a zettabyte. And they're saying that a year and a half ago, there's 2.7 zettabytes, and it's going to grow to 40. So that gives you some kind of an idea. That is significant growth. That's a significant amount of data. I think until you see all the zeros next to it, it's hard to put it in perspective. But suffice to say, that's a lot of storage that's going to need to be purchased and sold to be able to support that. Again, another way to look at a zettabyte, 40 million of them. It's the same as 40 trillion gigabytes of data, since we're all kind of familiar with gigabytes. That may put it in perspective. This was an estimate that I saw from IDC on how it relates to the grains of sand. And I kind of like the last one. If you put 40 zettabytes on Blu-ray discs, it would be the same weight as 424 aircraft carriers. So, just a few odd scientific things there, but I wanted to at least illustrate the colossal amount of data that we're talking about here, and hopefully put it in some type of terms that you can relate to. So what's causing the growth factors? Well, the data growth, I think we already covered that. It's growing very quickly. Data retention policies driven by various compliancy things such as SOX and HIPAA and a variety of other government related requirements that they have. But I think also growth from what I'll define as SMAC, which is social media, mobility, analytics, and cloud. Those are all driving significant amounts. Companies are using mobility. They're doing things along the web more. They're doing a lot more with analytics. A lot more organizations are working with the cloud, and all of those are growing a significant amount of data as well. So who's using it today actively and actually leveraging big data? I'm not going to go through all of these, but suffice to say Facebook, LinkedIn, Ford, Target, Amazon, Google, these are all organizations that leverage big data. And I'm just going to kind of pick on Amazon first, because I think they seem to have been, Google's good as well, but I think Amazon to me illustrated how to monetize big data and turn it into something real. So if you look at Amazon, they sell a variety of products from, it used to be Amazon sold a lot of things that they had in their own warehouses. Now, a lot of the things that you might buy through Amazon, it's become more of a portal, and it could be tying into small businesses, large businesses, and all different kinds of organizations that sell things through the Amazon engine that you're purchasing. In fact, a lot of cases when you buy something from Amazon, it's not coming from Amazon, it's coming from some third-party entity. Yet when you go onto Amazon, if you've ever noticed, let's say you looked up, I don't know, let's pick something like a laptop computer, and you look it up online, and you start kind of going through, and they've got the selections on the side to select the specifications of the brands or screen size and all these different things that you can drill down and pick something that you like. But if you ever notice, once you come up with a solution and you pick the one you want, it'll say down below, 4 other people, or some percentage of people looked at this one versus this one versus this one that are all similar in specifications to the one that you bought. And then a step further is it'll tell you that people that typically bought this may have also bought these other 5 things. Could be a added battery or a cable or some type of accessory, a bag, maybe a computer bag, and those could all come from different manufacturers. What they've done is they've collected all this data from all of these data sources, brought it back into their engines, crunched it, and that's why they can tell you of the of the 100 people that look at this product, 37% will buy it, but 22% will buy this, and 12% will buy something else. They can do that because of all that data crunching. And realistically, what it's done is it's changed your shopping experience. Because 10 years ago, if you wanted a laptop, you walked into a store, you looked at the models they had, or you looked at whatever was on sale on Sunday when you saw the paper come through, and you might have picked your laptop that way in a lot of cases. Well, now you've got all this information online down to pricing, availability, what people are looking at, and it's really changed the behavior for how people shop and how they go about making their selection process. So, again, you can go through each of these companies here, how they've leveraged it, but suffice to say, I mean, they're all good examples of companies that today are actively using big data, are actively profiting from it, and it's changing the way people operate. So, case in point, if you went today, would you open up a store, trying to sell, potentially laptops in the exact same way as you did in the past? You might have laptops. You might sell that along with other things that you sell, but the challenge is that you're going to be up against Amazon. You're probably going to be dealing with a much more educated consumer that has a lot more information because of the resources that are available to them. So big data will change the way people buy all of these things in all of these industries, and eventually it will work its way into virtually every industry. And the companies that will succeed are the ones that have best been able to analyze what they have from a data perspective and be able to respond and react to trends which are happening very quickly. Another quick case in point, which I just want to at least throw out, is that if you look at a lot of youth today, they all use social media, right? And I think if you're a little bit older, you've been around for a little bit, you might have finally adopted Facebook and maybe you're using that a little bit. The kids for Facebook, that was like the second thing kids were using. They were on MySpace first, then they were on Facebook, and then they all moved to Twitter, and then they moved to Instagram and something else. The point is that the consumers, as we get younger down, they're not as tied to a particular media or means or mechanism, and they're willing to try new things and move on to different technologies very quickly. They're not set in the ways that they go about doing things, the way they buy things. They're much more comfortable with looking at different ways of going about it. So again, big data will allow you to track those trends and be able to see what's happening or where those shifts are going on, because maybe you have to shift certain things in different areas based upon what's going on, and that's how it will impact most companies. There was big data research from the Cancer Society, and I don't really want to go through too much detail on this, but down near the bottom, it talks about the fact that one person's cancer, to actually measure it and look at all the sequences related to just a single patient's records, a single individual sequence is about 1.5 gigabyte, but it's about 18.8 petabytes for the total set of sequences for each unique or each individual case. And then a typical unique cancer sequence is somewhere between 30 gig and 360 gigabyte. So there's a lot of data involved with this. And so what they're doing right now with this project is the Cancer Society has actually got behind it. They're pulling all this information from all these research hospitals into a singular database so that they can compare different types and be able to spit out hopefully good data at the end of it to better help, if they found that certain types with certain sequences responded better to certain types of treatments, they can share that across all these hospitals, where before, an individual hospital kind of only knew what the doctors knew within that hospital and what information they had. Now they can drill down to a much deeper level using big data and analytics and come up with a different approach to be able to solve a patient's needs. Baseball is another great example. I'm going to skip the Facebook one. I'll just jump into baseball. A typical baseball game creates 20 terabytes of data per game. There's 15 games per day during the regular season, and they play 162 games. So there's 48 petabytes annually. And that's just the straight video from the game. It's not counting all the graphics and all the other types of things that they do and they capture. So you're talking about a significant amount of data that they're actually creating, and they have to manage all that. They, if they can pull that data up at any point in time, somebody's stats, somebody's, the third play of the game, they can go pull this up at a future point in time. It's a significant amount of data, and it is unstructured video data, graphic data, and otherwise, and stat data that wouldn't normally be populated into a regular database. So the secret sauce that goes to big data isn't just the data center and the storage. It's really the analytics side of it. And that's how businesses are responding. They're coming up with ways to leverage analytics to be able to make the business better, make smarter decisions as they go through the analysis of the data, and hopefully come back with better solution sets. This is not, I think, what people would normally consider business intelligence, or BI. That was out for a number of years. I think that plays into it. But really, the analytics that are going on now are much more sophisticated. With BI, a lot of that was coming from a few sources dumped to a common database, and they pulled information out of it. Why this is different is because it's coming from all these unstructured areas, and they're not as formalized as they were in the past, allowing organizations to be able to get to better data from a variety of different sources, where before I think they were limited when you looked at traditional BI and the input engines that could go into business intelligence. Where are people trying to go with this? Well, they're really trying to get to the point where it's, I think in the past, a lot of stuff were reactive. We looked at history. What were our sales like? What were the trends like? What happened over, this period of time? Where it's really going is trying to get into more of a front side of it, predictive analysis, where, yes, the past data is important, but the goal is to help a business decide what to do in the future. With all that past data, but what should they be doing? What ways should they adjust their business? What products should they be looking at? What things should they be stocking? Maybe there's certain other trends that are going on with their business that you can leverage to help provide that future predictions. And so really that's where analytics will come in. And the goal is to ultimately to transform an organization. Just as I mentioned Amazon earlier, there's a lot of companies that are struggling because of the Amazons of the world, because it changed the buying model, the selling motion, the selling cadence that was going on. And so other organizations have had to transform in order to still be competitive and be able to deal with, the challenges that are thrown by a company like that that's really leveraged big data and analytics. And so really this is to proactively help transform your customer's business. A couple of things out there. What are some of the things you're hearing around analytics? So there's a technology called Hadoop. It was actually created by Apache. It's an open source middleware. It is open source, so there are things you can actually play with this stuff for free. There's an HDFS, which is the Hadoop Distributed File Services, and this is a growing market. It's growing by about 55% a year, and the Hadoop and supported Hadoop marketplace is supposed to be around $14 billion inside of the next 3 years. So tremendous opportunity there to understand that and learn that if you've got folks on your side that understand, kind of that database and open structure. Hadoop is definitely one of the things I would, recommend at least doing some research on. And it's being embraced by a lot of the biggest companies. So when you start doing some research on Hadoop, you'll find that, everybody from Google and Amazon and Yahoo and some of the major organizations on down. And what it is it's allowed, this HDFS, this open file services, allows you to put your storage across any of number of vendors' different products and still be able to access it and analyze it. So when I look at big data and analytics, you go, well, who's leading the way? And I know I'm missing some. I'm just throwing a few of the major vendors out there. We've got quite a few at Tech Data that have a plan, but I wanted to put at least a few slides together to share with you of some of the different directions that our vendors are taking. So Cisco, they've got their converged infrastructure, networking, compute, and automation layers, and they've got a number of big data partnerships too, including the storage side of it. So again, you know, from a centralized perspective, from a unified computing perspective, Cisco is definitely one of the leaders out there. EMC, being one of the largest storage platforms, they've got an enterprise Hadoop solution, which I mentioned earlier. And if you look at this, it says EMC Greenplum. EMC acquired a company about 3 years ago called Greenplum. You can look it up on their website, and it truly is appliance-based or software-based analytic engines that allow you to analyze, you know, the data within your environment. It's very, very impressive technology. Again, certified by, you know, from Apache and Hadoop to operate, and it does, you know, has its own database structure back end that you can leverage, which was part of the Greenplum acquisition. And again, you see here, it's got the HDFS, you know, talking into whatever storage you have, but it can also obviously be EMC Isilon or other products. And there's a lot of different packaging options. I'm not going to go into all those. These are things that you can look at on EMC's website. But suffice to say, they've got a number of solutions around big data. VMware, you saw that they have the joint venture going out, you know, last year, which was with EMC and VMware for Pivotal. That's going to be dedicated to big data and analytics, and of course, Greenplum does get brought into there. They've also got their, if you go online, look at VMware's site about the software-defined data center, their vFabric, and their vFabric SQL Fire. These are all things around, you know, big data as well. So again, things that you can educate yourself on to get more information. By the way, I did just get a question that popped up if the slide deck is going to be available. Yes, the slide deck will be available after the event, as well as it will be, there's going to be a recorded session as well. So both will be available. I know I'm going through these kind of quick, but we're down to about 20 minutes, and I realize we've got a little bit more to go. Brocade, again, software-defined networking, big data play on that as well. IBM, actually I'm going to flip to this next slide from IBM because I think it's really pretty interesting the way they've kind of tied in availability management, disaster recovery, provisioning, optimization, backup, security, all of these different areas into what they consider their big data solution and consulting solution as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a kind of a play for IBM's overall. They've got a pretty complete, you know, solution around that as well. So you say, what do I want to do? If I want to get started in big data, what would I do as a reseller? Well, first of all, I think you have to decide if it's something you want to get into. I think you got to look at your own internal competencies, like, you know, data center, databases, data warehousing, any analytics, security and auditing. Where do you have engineering expertise? Where do you have sales expertise? Where do you have built-in customers that might need these technologies? And that would be kind of my starting point to determine if I wanted to get started. I think you have to look at the organizational challenges. If you really get into big data and analytics, it's not something where you're just going to go and have a sales rep go out and try to sell something or try to take an engineer and send it to a class. It really has to be sort of a organizational push, and there's going to be some time involved with it. So I'd say take it seriously, make sure you have the leadership around it, examine your talent internally, and make sure that, you know, it's something that you feel like your company can support. And then to build a practice, if you have any gaps in your skill sets, try to acquire those. Leverage your partnerships with distribution and manufacturers wisely and heavily, because I think that's where you're going to get your best benefit. And then lastly, and I'm going to put it in this next slide, is find a customer that maybe has some big data and analytic challenges and work with them closely on it. Maybe you have to put a little time into it at a lower cost rate, but, you know, let them know you want to develop a case study or case solution as you go through it. And the goal would be to work collectively with them from the business side, from the technology side, as well as your organization, help them through their challenges, come up with a solution set, and then you can document it, write your own case study or white paper, and that's something you should be able to duplicate for numerous other customers at that point. And again, I would do this as sort of a co-branded team where it's you, your customer, and the vendor and distribution partner to assist you through it. I think it's my last slide. There was an IT management survey on big data. Last slide on big data, rather. There was an IT management survey. Sorry, I apologize, folks. Just hit a chord with my foot as I moved. Sorry if that brought in some noise. 50% of companies will increase their IT budgets in 2013 to support big data. Of course, that year's passed. 60% said they were not ready for the surge in network traffic, and that was that point I mentioned earlier. If you sell networking, the folks that are doing big data, they do not have the network to support it. I promise you that. The majority of them probably are already pushing the edges of their network bandwidth. You're going to have security policies, so if you focus on security, there's opportunities there. Some folks will leverage the cloud, so hopefully you've baked in some cloud solutions. And the last one, I really love this. So it's 71% say that the network load is going to increase 2 to 3 times in their estimations over the next year to 2 years. So there's definitely some opportunity there. All right, well, we're down to about 15 minutes. We'll jump into the SDN and software-defined data center. So what's SDN? It's software-defined networking. Everyone's heard a lot about it. Really what you're doing, though, is you're trying to, traditionally, networks are set up by a lot of configurations in routers and switches and core switches, and there's a lot of configurations, a lot of opportunity for challenges or issues or errors through that. Well, what software-defined networking does is the same thing that we've been doing now for years on the server side. Years ago, we used to have a physical server for every application we put out on the network. What changed was the virtualization platforms that came out, like VMware, like Microsoft Hyper-V, and what it allowed us to do was abstract the server layer and basically virtualize that server layer onto the server hardware and allow us to get multiple servers on a single piece of hardware. Software-defined networking is exactly the same thing. It's the ability to abstract the physical connections that people use, whether it be a wireless or a wired connection, from the management, control, and programming layers from the network. That's really what software-defined networking is. So it's taking it up a level, virtualizing your network components so that you can manage them at a much higher layer rather than have to do everything down at a device level like we do today. If you look at where it's going, a lot of it's going to be open standards based, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So where does that fit in with software-defined data center? I think software-defined data center is really that next kind of utopian viewpoint that people want to get to. So I think we can all checkbox at server virtualization and say, yes, there's a lot of tools out there today. We've got server virtualization. Network virtualization, which is SDN, that's coming on strong, and I think over the next few years you're going to see that play out. The last piece of it is kind of centralized storage virtualization, and I know there's a number of tools out there today, but again, it hasn't quite standardized. It's still fairly open. But ultimately, I think once you have servers, networking, and storage all virtualized, I think then you've got the truly software-defined data center. So we're a little bit away from that. I think that's the end game, the end goal. I would say that by the time we hit, probably 2020, I think you're going to find that most organizations have all of the components and layers in place to have a truly software-defined data center, and probably the majority of businesses are managing everything through software as opposed to physically through devices. And I just saw this one pop up the other day, this term, but I think it's great. And it was just, they had SDX, which is software-defined everything. And isn't that really where we want to get to? We want to get to the point where our entire data center, for the most part, can be managed from various consoles, and not just management tools, but truly managed, changed, and provisioned on the fly as you go throughout the data center. So you're going to aggregate all this management of the data center through potentially a handful of portals or a very simple, straightforward process. So SDN, how big is it going to be? Well, ACG research said it's $15 billion by 2018. IDC estimated it's growing at 117% per year. I saw another study that said that enabled hardware is going to grow from $1 billion in 2013, which would have been last year, to $13 billion in 2018. So again, if you sell networking, I like that growth number. I think it's a great trajectory for everyone. One thing I want to point out, too, is this is what we're hearing a lot from our community, our reseller community, that they're hearing from their customers, is that while people may not be deploying a completely full software-defined network today, what they're asking for is future-proofing. They want to know that what they're buying is capable of SDN and that there are tools around it that they can leverage, whether they're deploying a full SDN today or not. Maybe it's portions of the network that they're deploying as SDN. Maybe it's future-proofing, knowing that they may switch to a full SDN inside of the next 24 to 36 months. But what they're asking, what they want to know is the things that they're buying today, are they capable of tying into an overall SDN strategy? And so that would be the question that I'd ask each of you to look at, look through the lines that you have, understand the response for that, because I think that's the question that you'll probably get from time to time, is where are they headed with it? What are the benefits from it? Well, agility, scalability, and simplicity. It's an easier to manage way of going about it. Who's leading the SDN market? There's really kind of two avenues. I think there's vendors that are leading the marketplace, and I think there's open standards that are coming about. And let's talk about both of those. So the vendors, I've got a short list there of some of the big names. They're quite honestly, it's a much larger list of organizations that are participating in part of this whole SDN initiative going on. I suspect that, if you look through the data center manufacturers that you sell, I'd be surprised if it wasn't at least, 75% of them that have some kind of a play or tie-in from an SDN perspective, anybody that ties into the network or has a networking product. But really, I think what the exciting part that's going on is this open standards piece. So I've given you kind of three things to look at: opennetworking.org, OpenStack, which is a cloud one, and then OpenFlow. And let me take those three kind of individually. OpenNetworking.org has created some open standards, and the interesting thing is there's probably 100 vendors and manufacturers on their list of partners. You can go on their website and look at it. All of the ones I listed above are on that list. So again, all of the regular suspects you would expect, and a lot of really big names are part of it and supporting kind of this open networking platform. And so, again, I'd recommend you take a look at that. Pretty interesting website, a lot of good information. The second part of it is this OpenStack that's come out, and really what that is how can I extend my internal data center infrastructure into the cloud, and what vendors are supporting that. And the ones that are doing it via an open standard are doing so via OpenStack. That seems to be the prevalent one that we're seeing out there. And the last one, you'll see OpenFlow come up frequently as well. Again, that's another open standard for network protocols, and allows you to use a variety of different types of protocols internally in more of an open format and an open manner. So that's the OpenFlow protocol. You can find all of these things. Most of them, I think, are through the opennetworking.org, but you have the ability to look online and see more information. So that should answer most of the questions about SDN. I know I kind of kept it kind of brief, but we're down to about 5 minutes here. So BYOD and VDI. What is that? I kind of covered it before. The users are getting very intelligent with the way they operate. If you think about most savvy users today, they probably have a minimum of 3 devices themselves, a laptop or desktop computer at the office. They may have a personal one of those or a personal tablet they use frequently, and I think virtually everybody has a phone that somehow connects into their office environment, or at least some percentage of their applications. And then I think I put kind of a third one out there, which is kiosk, which there's frequently times where you're not where you want to be, but you want to be able to grab a PC or computer. Maybe it's at a hotel and it's at the business desk, or it's somebody else's system you're using for a few minutes, or somebody has a Chromebook and you want to borrow it for a couple seconds to go look something up. And I think, again, how can you use any device anywhere at any time and be able to access the environment? I think the other thing that's really mature on BYOD and VDI is the platform that have been defined. And I think, there's a lot of key leaders. I think VMware, Oracle, Microsoft, again, software platforms really is what I was thinking about there, that have really defined kind of a VDI play that allows you to take all of these apps that you use, both, legacy apps as well as web-based apps, and bringing it forward to the users in kind of a single motion, single platform, single portal. And that's really been the, sort of the drive from those manufacturers. So with VDI, I think it's fully defined. It hasn't been completely embraced yet. The interesting thing about it, though, and the opportunity is that with VDI, depending on your expertise in BYOD, there's been a lot of licenses sold. Not a lot of them have been deployed, but to deploy them creates a great opportunity for you, because it's going to drive data center requirements. And, there are solutions down to a small to medium business level on up to an enterprise level around VDI and BYOD. Why are people looking at it? Really, scalability, cost, performance. Those are the things I think they come into it. Ability to open up their environment and access it anytime, anywhere. But you do, again, have to look at the components you're putting together to make sure they make sense, because you can actually spend more on a VDI, BYOD solution than buying the individual devices themselves, which can create a challenge. So it's about managing to the solution set to make sure you're getting the best performance and best bang for the buck for the client. So we talked about a variety of different emerging technologies, and I know what I came out of this, hopefully with you, is a couple of different things. One, my recommendation is survey your customers, and not in a written survey or a survey monkey kind of thing, but really going out and talking to your customers, having your sales reps talk to your customers, having your engineers, and find out, ask the questions. What are you guys doing, are interested in, or what are you thinking about from SDN? What are you thinking about from VDI or BYOD? I mean, are these things that you guys are talking about internally? If it's a smaller business, talking to them about where do they want to take their business in the future, because it may tie into these technologies. I think analytics and big data are a big deal for a lot of companies, small, medium, and large. And so big data is not always necessarily just a large amount of storage. It really does apply across the spectrum. So these are all areas that you can talk to your customers and find information out about what they see and what opportunities they have. Then I think the next thing is take your key vendors that you're working with today. And I mentioned a few of them on the slides, but there may be others that you work with, and just find out what are their strategies in each of these areas. Well, help them educate you, because they've all got products, they've all got solutions that are available today, on the market today, that can be sold immediately. And find out what those are, and also find out kind of what their roadmap is. Where are they headed with these technologies, and how will that apply in the future? Because, again, they're going to only get better and simpler and probably more scalable as time goes on. I would leverage tech data and things that we have. We do a lot of webinars that you can attend. We do a lot of trainings. We have our shows that we offer. Many of you attend things like Channel Link or some of our AIS events or other events throughout the year. Definitely attend those shows and leverage all of the people we have here, talk to the engineers, and use us as a tool to help you better understand what the opportunities are. Build a plan of action. I think the challenge is a lot of times it's good to get information, but then having a goal on how you're going to align your business to be able to take advantage of these emerging trends and what things you see happen. I think once you know what your customers want and what your vendors are doing and what support you have around it, the next step is definitely to build your plan to get there. And I think the last thing is just to market and deliver the solutions to your customers. So that's my slides. I'm going to check, do we open this up usually? Or? So what we'll do at this point, the slideshow, again, will be available from a recorded perspective. I have my contact info on the sheet, on the slide in front of you right now, so if there's any specific questions you guys want to take up after the call, or if anybody wants to have a conversation about any of these areas in more depth, more than happy to help them out. If it's something I can't answer, I can hopefully point you to someone that can within Tech Data. As I said before, I came from the reseller community, spent a lot of time there, managed technical services, so I kind of come from a technology perspective, but I clearly see these trends and these opportunities with these technologies, and it's definitely, there's a lot of change going on in our industry as a result of the technology changes that are happening. So the goal would be to hopefully work together with you and help you guys develop strategies to get there and take advantage of those and to build your business out. So with that, I want to thank everyone for your time today. I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk to you, and again, feel free to communicate with me on an email or otherwise with anything you may need. Thank you. Have a good day.
Greg Bain has left the conference.